opportunity to welcome you once again for another webinar session. And today we are discussing a very interesting subject on the emerging carbon markets in East Africa. Now, for all of you who are enthusiasts in environmental law, you know carbon markets have been a point of discussion across the globe, not only in East Africa. And there are several schools of thought that have come to add their opinion in this field. Some call it a blessing, some call it a curse, some are calling it a solution to development of Africa. Now, this afternoon, we're really honored to host a very distinguished panel of ladies and gentlemen who have taken time to go in depth in the study of carbon markets and environmental related matters, but also they have experience working in different entities wherever. And our session this afternoon is going to be spearheaded or led by a gentleman who is not new to most of us. He's been in the spheres of legal practice in Tanzania, practicing at Rex Advocates. And Mr. Idi Juma Kasi is an associate of Rex Advocates with extensive background in environmental management. He focuses specifically on green energy and carbon trading. Today, he brings his wealth and expertise in this field. He has quite a number of accolades stemming from being an alumni of the University of Dar es Salaam. He's a commissioner of oaths and notary public in the United Republic of Tanzania. And he's an active member of the Young Lawyers Association of the East Africa Law Society and the Tanganyika Law Society. Mr. Kasi also routinely advises his clients on legal and regulatory frameworks necessary for successful carbon market penetration in Tanzania. His expertise has guided several clients through complex environmental legislations and policies, often involving strategic discussions with the Vice President's office in charge of environmental law. Mr. Kasi, we are profoundly honored and exceedingly humbled to have you host this session. I will now turn it over to you to take it on from here. Thank you.
Excuse me, we seem can't hear Idi Kasi, so you need to.
Thank you, Dr. Brian. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Gabriel, I'm humbled for the introduction. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today on this important and timely discussion on the seizing opportunities, a legal perspective on emerging carbon market in East Africa. As introduced by Gabriel, it's my pleasure to serve you today as a moderator, and we'll explore the intricate of dynamics in this market and the legal frameworks and the penetration of the market in East Africa, and generally all about carbon markets. Today we'll be having a number of speakers. Of course, not quite. We're having 4 speakers, and they will explore on the intricate legal landscape that will define the carbon market in East Africa. And they will try to examine both the challenges and the opportunities which are brought by this market, and how the market is shaping the future of the environment in general. In lineup, we have distinguished experts who will share their insights based on the extensive research and hands-on experience. To start with, we'll be having Dr. Brian Muti. Dr. Brian Muti is a seasoned advocate of the High Court of Kenya and a prolific consultant in governance and legal reforms. Dr. Brian holds a PhD in leadership and governance from Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology, complemented by degree in law and project management. His extensive experience includes collaboration with international bodies such as World Bank and UNDP, focusing on environmental governance and policy reforms. Dr. Brian will shed us on the key players, mechanism in East Africa, carbon markets, their frameworks, and the impact in regional initiatives. Dr. Brian, the floor is yours. We are here to listen and get everything from your extensive research and experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Edie. I hope I'm audible enough. To all the listeners, participants, and also the organizers. As you said correctly, my name is Dr. Brian Mutie, not Muti, and I'll be uploading the slides right away.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Brian.
Mutie, Brian Mutie.
Mutie, okay, thank you.
Thank you. So now I'm uploading my slides. You may tell me whether they can be seen. I hope that can be seen, right?
Yes, we can see them perfectly.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Edie, and all panel members. And I'm just going to take you through this sphere, which is quite somewhat current phenomenon that our discipline that has come into the market or into the foreplay in terms of carbon markets. And I'll be confining myself within the boundaries of East Africa and dissect issues to my audience in a manner that they can really understand what this new phenomenon, this new discipline is all about. And I was tasked with the role of breaking this down to you in terms of the background of what it entails to do with carbon credit and carbon markets. And because you cannot talk about carbon credits without markets, that's why I decided to join the two so that it can be a little bit easier for the participants to follow. I'll be just having 5 minutes, if I'm not wrong, to take you through all this. And therefore, carbon credits are also known as offsets, which are documents or that indicate that 1 ton of CO2 has been eliminated from the environment and has stopped being released. So those are the so-called definitions of that. And to confirm a project's climate impact, it must be independently verified and meet certain requirements. So not everybody is able to offset carbon from the environment. For example, the verification should show the impact is permanent and show the damage would not have really come without revenue from carbon credit. And therefore, the produced certificates can be exchanged and eventually sold to people or businesses looking to meet their climate targets by retiring carbon credits in order to offset their emissions. This is just an illustration of a carbon credit market where the production, you can see the stage where the production is. Then there are entities or companies that normally harness this, and they pay a lot of money to those who plant trees or sell carbon credits. And these are farmers, communities who have ecosystems which are safeguarded or have planted trees enough to offset carbon from the environment. And in exchange, they get money for that purpose. And I'm talking about those who are residing in Kenya. When they look at the MyGov, there's a newspaper called MyGov or MyGov for that matter, which has indicated, has illustrated a community which, as early as yesterday, they were paid 370 million Kenya shillings for just selling their carbon credits to certain companies. Now, carbon credit projects can take different projects or forms. For example, we can talk about forestry and land use, can talk about agriculture, blue carbon, renewable energy, such as biomass. We're talking about household devices, e.g. solar home systems and clean stoves. transport, livestock farming, waste management, industrial gases, engineering carbon dioxide. These may be some of the forms of credit, carbon credit projects that I can talk about. Then I can just talk about two, types of carbon markets. One is voluntary, the other one is compliance. When you talk about voluntary, this is just the normal voluntary mechanisms that individuals, companies, governments can take, or enterprises, to ensure that they participate voluntarily in terms of carbon markets. And there's a compliance, which is actually the regulatory one, or regulatory imposed, which has to be following the issues of laws, policies that have been set to ensure that you comply within certain limits of emissions, etc., etc., and also they guide in terms of the selling and the distribution of carbon markets. Good people, I do not have much slides, but I just want to take you straight to what we talk about stakeholders in East Africa community, because I'm told I have to bring out this into perspective. And when we talk about East Africa, we are talking about Kenya, Uganda, Southern Sudan, Rwanda, we have Tanzania, we have Uganda, we have Burundi, and we have the newly included Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, which is also another new member of the East Africa community. Let me say that about 65% of carbon credits issued in sub-Saharan Africa are voluntarily in nature. The voluntary carbon markets are voluntary because some of them are located in countries which have no proper legal grounding to ensure that they impose proper, curfews, obligations, etc., etc. And these countries include Kenya, Zimbabwe, Ethiopia, Uganda, and the DRC. These are mostly countries where we have voluntary markets. As an exemption, South Africa uses a national carbon tax and a cap trade system to function inside compliant markets. So when you look at South Africa, they have a regulatory framework to guide on matters administrative, on matters of carbon. However, about 11% of all carbon credits granted globally between 2016 and 2021 came from African nations, and only 2 of the world's entire year carbon credit capacity was used. This means that Africa produces the least carbon and environmental degradation compared to the Western world, which produces the majority. But when it comes to reaping maximum benefit, Africa reaps maximum because they are able to sell carbon credits to the countries that have no ability to tame their gaseous emissions to the environment. Nonetheless, in the 7 East Africa member states, we are talking about the ones that I've mentioned, there were 465 registered clean development mechanisms, what we call CDMs, activities as of 2021, along 53 projects, and the 412 CPAs within 58 program activities. Additionally, 52% of all projects authorized in Africa are within our region, which is East Africa. 60% of the projects reached the end of their crediting term by the year 2022, which was 2 years ago. And therefore, it should be noted that the issuance of volumes of the voluntary carbon market standards, including Gold Standard, Vera, Plan Vivo, are higher than those of CDM, having issued over 37 million credits. CDMs are Clean Development Mechanism activities. There's still a lot of unrealized potential, good people, that should be investigated, given that the potential for mitigation, which may reach 225 million tons of carbon dioxide for the years 2021 to 2030. So good people, this is a major opportunity for us. Those who are champions of environmental management, they can take advantage of this opportunity and get themselves chunks of land which they can plant trees and be candidates for becoming the next millionaires in the frontier of carbon markets. Carbon markets involve a number of players. I'm talking about stakeholders, and depending on the market, we are talking about governments, companies, finance and trading organizations, and the developers, as well as brokers. Brokers are also there. So you need to be very careful that you are not traded off by brokers who may benefit much of your profits at the chagrin or at the expense of you or your community. Voluntary carbon markets, on the other hand, involves project developers, traders, corporations, brokers, private citizens, and NGOs. My list is endless. Individuals can also be part and a parcel of the stakeholders when it comes to carbon markets. The growth in the development of carbon markets has also been seen emergence of various groups, organizations, initiatives, such as East Africa Alliance, the African Carbon Markets Initiative, the Nairobi Climate Network. You can also go ahead and register yours and tap into these blessings that East Africa particularly, is reaping. Now, this illustration is some of the members, especially non-state actors, who are so much into this carbon market business, and they are reaping maximum out of it. You can see there are registries, there are developers, we have brokers, and we have buyers. For example, when you look at the category of buyers, you can see Google, Delta, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Disney, General Motors, Chevrolet, Barclays Bank, ExxonMobil. These are just examples of the companies that are in the business of buying. There are brokers who are also in the trade. We have developers at the same time, and we also have the registries. The illustration there for you can really guide you on this. Now, I have a case study of several countries, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, as I wind up on this, who are very much active in matters of carbon market. And with forest resources covering nearly 48 million hectares, Tanzania has emerged as one of the key African players in the global carbon market. I don't know whether it is something to do with the new leadership of Madam Suluhu, but I can tell you Tanzania is doing very, very well when it comes to this sphere. Between 2018 to 2022, it was reported that this country received 32 billion shillings from carbon trade projects implemented across the country. I believe Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, DRC can really reap something out of this one. As of 31st, 2023, Tanzania received 35 applications for various carbon credit projects, estimated to generate in excess of $1 billion US. Wow. Tanzania introduced the National Carbon Trading Guidelines in 2022 to outline more precise framework for national, regional, and international stakeholder cooperation in carbon trading projects. The Tanzanian government also updated their National Development Carbon in July 2021, which is National Carbon Trading in 2021. The NDC is anchored on its National Climate Change Strategy 2021 and the Zanzibar Climate Change Strategy 2014, which is in line with what we call in Kenya Vision 2030, Tanzania, they call it Tanzania Development Vision 2025, and Zanzibar Vision 2050. Following COP28, which is a community of practitioners within the sphere of climate change in Dubai, Tanzania signed one of the major land-based carbon credit projects designed to cover 6 national parks. And I must give it to Tanzania for their commitment towards the same. I don't want to belabor much on them, but I'll be sharing my slides on the gains and the strides that the Republic of Tanzania has really done. Let me just touch briefly on Kenya, which has the largest CDM portfolio in Eastern Africa. The country has 221 registered activities, 20 project activities, 190 component project activities, which cut across 29 programs altogether. And Kenya is the home of sizable portfolio of voluntary carbon standards. As I said, ours is a voluntary one. Then we can talk about 72 activities, 51 registered gold standards, 19 voluntary, and 2 are Plan Vivo projects. Kenya has been granted more than 123 million certified emissions reductions with better coke stoves, water purifications, and grid-connected renewable energy, such as wind and geothermal, making up to top 3 subsectors. And therefore, good people, I can mention the issue of Turkana Wind and Kengen as some of the power projects that have been enlisted as part of the carbon trade sphere. Since 2013, Kenya and the Japanese government have been working together through what we call joint credit mechanism. And up to now, we can also talk about World Bank financing some of the frameworks according to Paris Agreement, and also the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority has also actively participated in what we call offsetting and reduction scheme for international aviation through the airports that we have here in Kenya, such as the Kenya Airways, which has also been engaged in carbon offsetting since 2021. Briefly, as I wind up on Rwanda, this is a clean development mechanism, CDM, which had been granted more than 1.6 million carbon credits in Rwanda by the year 2022. And I can say Rwanda is a very upcoming, a player when it comes to CDM projects. And you can see the number there, where as much as their population is very small compared to the other countries, they have been issued with 85 voluntary carbon market activities so far, and it has begun participating in the World Bank Carbon Initiative for Development Standards crediting framework, which intends to enable participation in Paris Agreement and Article 6.2 cooperative approaches. And it has really registered large-scale CDM POA with a single registered CPA which is actually the Gigawatt Global Program of Activities reference number is given there. As I wind up on this, these carbon markets are regulated under the United Nations Climate Change, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which we call UNFCCC. And of course, this follows the issue of Kyoto Protocol outlines since 1997, a clarion call by member states, of course, to reduce gaseous emissions. The Kyoto Protocol is divided in these 3 mechanisms, which carbon markets, which we talk about, which we have talked about. We have the GI and also ETS. ETS is majorly British, UK, and so on and so on. Paris Agreement of 2015 further enforces the country's obligations, as I said, under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, where we are supposed to meet these emission reduction goals by the time frames that has been given there. Of course, as I wind up, good people, the 2022 government of Tanzania issued environmental management control and management trading regulations. Kenya also, which is a key player, of course, adopted what we call Climate Change Act 2016, and also at the EMCA, which is the Environmental Management Coordination Act. These are some of the frameworks and laws that we have as countries in member states that are able to help us harness or regulate this sphere of carbon trading. Then we have the East Africa Carbon Markets Initiative. This is a regulatory framework which was founded after COP 2027 in 2022. We also have what we call SCMI, which is the United Nations Climate Change High-Level Champions, which works with the UN to ensure that the matters of carbon emissions are adequately addressed. I can go on, good people. I don't want to eat into someone's time, but these are the carbon market mechanisms that I have talked about. One is the Kyoto Protocol's flexibility mechanism. CDM is another one. The GI, as you were asking, what are they meaning? And the other one is international emissions traditions. These are the 3 ones that I had mentioned before. And then these are the mechanisms in terms of emissions trading systems. The ETS, you are asking yourself what this could be. The second one is that CDM, which is Clean Development Mechanism. The third one is what we call the JI, which is actually joint implementation. And that's where we are talking about Kenya, and Japan having, come into a discussion to agree on matters of how they can move this forward. It has also worked with the World Bank to address these matters. And these are commitments that are embroiled together with what we call the Kyoto Protocol, the Paris, agreement, the COP, whatever COP, and this is a clarion call for us to be, in line with these, obligations. So carbon markets and the Paris Agreement, I've talked about them. Then we have internationally transferred mitigation, where once you feel that you have enough carbon credits, you are able to sell them across other countries which do not have the capacity or the ability to cut on their gaseous emissions, especially the Western countries. Now, good people, we have what we call non-market strategies and market strategies. Now, for non-market strategies, we are talking about regulators, governments, citizens, NGOs, all coming together to ensure that they all contribute towards emissions or reducing the emissions from the environment. Now, because I've eaten into someone's time, let me conclude that carbon markets could play a very huge role in East Africa's energy transition and the aspect of commercialization. And that's why I'm saying people should take advantage of this. Crucially, voluntary carbon markets, they represent a major opportunity to accelerate economic development in East Africa and also Africa, and also simultaneously curb greenhouse gaseous emissions. The Eastern African Alliance, that was born out of the need to participate, influence, and enhance regional preparedness with regard to the new generation of market mechanisms, and Article 6 of the Paris Agreement provides progressive foundation towards realizing the target. And I'm saying, however, seizing the opportunity presented by carbon markets will take much dedication, thoughtful and deliberate action, especially among us Eastern African stakeholders. With that, without wasting much ado, good people, that's the end of my slide presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brian, for the wonderful presentation. Before you rest, I just wanted to pose just a little bit of a question. So when someone asks you to generalize the presentation in terms of what needs to be enhanced to ensure this market thrive within East Africa, what would you respond to that question?
Well, thank you for that question. Working tirelessly to ensure that we have harmonized regulatory and legal framework, to me, at a policy level comes in handy, because this is the only way that we can regulate the market itself so that it's actually not infringed by these people, brokers who take advantage of innocent farmers who would contribute immensely towards eradicating of the gaseous emissions through the carbon market. And I'm saying this because when you look at the sphere of farmers and the community conservancies that are existing today, some of them are not so much keen to invest in carbon credits because some extortionists or people who are taking advantage of their innocence are reaping maximum at their expense, because the citizens, participants, and the communities are not well protected by harmonized regulatory framework. If we do that in East Africa as a community, we shall ensure that the Westerners do not just come and plant themselves anywhere in Uganda, in Rwanda, simply because the law does not exist that would cushion citizens from being exploited. Thank you. I hope I have answered your question.
Yeah, clearly. Thank you so much, Dr. Brian. And you touched base everything that you prepared in terms of the framework and the future outlook and the key players and the mechanisms. So thank you so much. So without further ado, let me welcome another speaker. I think we have Dr. Bazira. Dr. Bazira is... You're welcome, Dr. Bazira. For the introduction, Dr. Bazira is an executive director of Water Governance Institute, engaging in critical research, training, and advocacy on water and associated natural resources. Dr. Bazira has been instrumental in shaping policies through his roles in various environmental and transparency initiatives across Uganda. He will discuss the legal barriers to carbon market entry, identify areas needing legal research, and propose reforms to enhance these markets' effectiveness. Dr. Bazira, you're welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. And I think I'll have to ask you to drop down Muite's presentation so that I can upload mine, yeah.
Yeah, sure. Dr. Brian, can you, yeah, sure.
Yeah, so that I can share what I have for you.
Dr. Brian?
And just to say that I think Brian has done a very good job of creating the scene for discussions, the background, the information about carbon trading. And for me, my role is going to be more about what you described, the policy issue, legal issues, institutional issues, and even the market itself, and how we can make the market a real market, and how we can find opportunities that can enable us to tap into the carbon trading market. So let me just see if I can now begin to share my presentation. Let's do this one. Okay, okay. Okay. Hello?
Yes, we can assist.
I'm trying to get it on board.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, it is. Okay. Can you see it properly? Can you see the presentation? Hello?
Yes, I can see it, but yeah, we can see it here.
Okay. That's fine. So just to make a follow-up of what Dr. Muite has said is that I'm just going to give a brief on what he has also said. Carbon trading is also known as the carbon emissions trading or carbon offset. So that story has been made clear by Dr. Muite, and it's about buying and selling of credits that permit a company or an entity to emit a certain amount of carbon or other greenhouse gases. And it is a kind of a justification for that company to continue emitting carbon dioxide. And I want to say that I'm actually having this teleconference while I'm on the road. So the network that I'm using is not very stable. So please bear with me in case you lose my voice or I get off, because I'm actually using my phone to hotspot. So please bear with me on that regard. But I'll try to do my best to make sure that I deliver the message. So carbon credits and the carbon trade, like have been mentioned, is authorized by governments, hoping that they will reduce carbon, overall carbon emissions and fight the impacts of climate and climate change. The question, however, is for all the years that we have seen and the amount of monies that have been involved and exchanged hands between the North and the South, the question that we need to interrogate is, has this actually happened over the years? What has been the impact of the money so far that has been distributed, especially to the developing countries, from the developed countries? What impact has it actually done in respect to reducing the emissions globally? I think for me, since you said that part of my discussion, my role is to provide insights for research and policy issues that may be needed, I thought that's a question I needed to present to all of us, and we interrogate it and see whether actually the monies that we have so far paid have had significant, or what impact they've had in terms of reducing carbon emissions, both at country level, regional level, and global level. I think we have been told that this was an idea that started around COP15, and with an agreement, a Paris Climate Agreement. This was also confirmed in Glasgow in COP26, and I have seen, of course, our Ugandan partners and African partners joining the fray of carbon trading with the East African trade bloc. So the carbon trading is a very interesting business, but I think it's still an emerging business that is yet to be well understood and has a lot of complexities and intricacies that we need to streamline, because different financiers have different terms of engagement, and so that creates some kind of a host of complex dealings that are not clear, that are not consistent. And so as we go into this business, we need to understand, as lawyers, we need to understand the legal implications of the work that we do. So,
sorry, Dr. Azir. Sorry for interjecting. Is there a possibility to have to have two time, because we are a bit hard to see the slides? Maybe you can enlarge the slides.
Enlarge the slides.
Yes, yes. At the moment, we're having two screens.
Is that better?
Not yet. I mean, we are seeing two screens of yourself and the presentation. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's not very interesting. So two screens, because I'm also seeing one on my side here, on the left. Is it large enough?
Yeah, at least, yeah,
close
sure.
This. Close this one on the side. Okay, let me continue with this one, if it works well.
Sure.
Okay, so for me, the history, I don't want to go much about the history. I've made some literature that is talking about that one carbon permit or credit permit now goes for a price of about 80 pounds to between 80 pounds to 100 pounds per ton. And that's quite attractive. And probably that could explain the volumes of monies that different countries have adopted too. But we also run a risk that the amount of money might be tempting for people to dive into a market that is still volatile, a market that is still unsteady, and so it may not have guarantees for various payments. It may not have guarantees for even the kind of delivery in terms of reductions that we may want to see, because different systems contribute to different investments with different targets. For example, you may have an investor that wants to invest his carbon underground. You may want to have an investor that wants to invest in above ground projects like forestation and tree planting, and probably others who want to push their carbon into the sea. So the kind of milestones or indicators or targets that they may set for their financing may not match what is actually happening on the ground. So this multiplicity of trading blocks, trading units, traders has that challenge. So as legal practitioners, we need to come in and appreciate the different dynamics that are involved so that we can provide the kind of services that would be necessary. And some people think that has been very effective, that is as measurable, verifiable, and it can actually be determined. Yes, we all know the science and the calculations involved in actually calculating the carbon dioxide or greenhouse gas emissions. But what we are failing to do is to match the investments to the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that have been taken out of the environment or that have been sequestrated into the environment. And so for me, it is seeming like the carbon market, carbon trading is more of a penitence by the main polluters for a sin that they do not want to stop, which is pollution. And remember that I think it's also a feel-good concept that is happening around. So we also need to understand how are these carbon markets created, because many of the players come in midway or towards the tail end of the carbon market value chain, and so do not appreciate the genesis and the foundations for which these markets are based on. And one, probably, I missed Doctor's submission, but we should have talked about the fact that there are a number of trading blocks, about 3. And you have one for the developed countries, which are basically associated with the purchase agreements, because they are the ones mainly who are purchasing this carbon. And there are those for the clean development mechanism for the developing countries, who are actually the ones from whom the credits being bought. Why? Because developing countries are emitting less of the emissions to the environment. And so the purchase agreements from the northern countries are more like the buyers of the credits that are more to the developing countries. So that's something that is important to take note. The other bit that I would like us to talk about is that the current markets, carbon markets, are more of a pseudo market because they do not have the tenets, characteristics, and the character of the common and traditional markets. So that's very, very important for us to know, because those characteristics influence the manner in which the trading goes on. One is that you have a market that has been generated by people who are the producers of the emission, mainly who are the producers of the emission. This is the developed countries. They are the very same people that are setting up the prices for the market, and they are the very same people who are buying the product. So which goes, kind of circumvents the traditional markets, and you find that the buyer of the market is determining the price for the person from whom the credits are being offered. Even the credits, yes, they are mainly controlled by the multinational or international entities, the UNFCCC, and other international NGOs who are part of the group that is passing on these credits, or at least determining the credits. And so there is little role and influence that is coming from the developing countries. So as a stakeholder in this sector, it is important to understand what are the interests that are associated with the markets, who are the winners, who are the losers in this market dynamic. And that's very important for us to note. I am not very sure how many lawyers have been used or have been involved in even drafting the conventions. For example, the UNFCCC. And what kind of lawyers? Were they lawyers from the Greater North, Developed North, or are they lawyers from the developing countries? What role did the lawyers from the developing countries play in the crafting of the UNFCCC convention? What is their role at country level in defining the climate change strategy? Because there are legal implications associated with. And so we need to understand the role of the lawyer of the advocate in this whole campaign. And so because of the multiplicity of markets, you have to keep adjusting oneself to the restrictions or the conditions that are set by each of the markets. And it is a good thing. I'm seemingly speaking as if I'm against the market. I am not against the market. I'm only saying that we need to streamline the market so that there is true benefit in terms of payments for the respective roles of the main polluters and the roles of the less polluters. Because if we were to follow the polluter pays principle, the payments or the funds that should be coming to the developing countries should actually be more. And if you look at the financial architecture that is being used to transmit these funds, it's not clear. You have those through the World Bank, you have those through using the World Bank architectural structure, you have those through the NGOs who are using the structures that they have generated by themselves that are probably a mismatch from those of the World Bank and IMF. And so that needs to be understood. So what are the opportunities for us as stakeholders? Where are these places that we can begin to research, we can begin to develop our respective policies? And I want to say at this stage that many of our countries, while they have a climate strategy, Uganda has, Kenya has, Tanzania has, and Uganda has a climate policy. We also have some regulations, and in the Act, we have an institutional framework, but I have not yet seen a very clear mechanism for carbon trading, a detailed mechanism for carbon trading at country level. I'm yet to be informed from our partners in the region to see if there is something that they have that actually is very clear, because I know that Uganda has benefited from the carbon trading mechanism for the last 15 years, but with not a very clear mechanism for actual carbon trading. I am involved in the Tax Justice Alliance at the Ugandan level, but I've also not seen a tax arrangement, because the concept of carbon tax was mooted by the Americans. They ran away from it for some time. It is, of course, it is an obvious tax, and they have moved on to different mechanisms that are seemingly lighter and less stringent than what a carbon tax would actually have done. And that's why probably why we have a clean development mechanism, which has its own processes that involve a lot of compliance at country. Supporting sustainable projects that we need to work on. Yes.
We lost you in a few seconds. Huh?
Okay, understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was saying that we need to do research and understand the impacts and implications of each of the different carbon trading mechanisms, and also understand why they were designed the way they are designed, and also understand the implications, assess the interests that play within those mechanisms. Whose interests are they serving? Are they serving the interest of the developed North? Are they serving the interest of the South? And what is their positive or negative impact in respect to cleaning up the atmosphere of the carbon dioxide? So here I'm trying to cite, on this screen slide, I'm trying to cite some of the carbon trading models that have been tried out, and which have their own challenges in respect to actually delivering the kind of impact that one would have desired to have at the global level. These are basically developed by the US, applied by the US, and are being copied and pasted in other developing countries without actually having sufficient review of the implication, both financial, economical, social, and environmental impacts. The other one has been discussed is the Kyoto Protocol, the Marrakesh Accords, and we have seen this protocol, its mandate was ending in 2012, so it has been revised. We're in a new era of the Kyoto Protocol. It also underwent a few adjustments to make it lesser stringent, because before, countries like the US had refused to be part of the protocol, even after being part of the training. But of course, because the Kyoto Protocol process would require that developed countries change their production lines, change their emissions today, reduce the emissions, and by that they have to change the production lines. And changing industry is not something that happens overnight. It's an expensive process. And so there's that general reluctance for actually countries to commit themselves to reduce emissions, and more are prepared to buy credits in the developing countries where there's less emission. And so for me, my argument, even with this current discussions on carbon trade, is that we argue for more of the polluter pays principle. And I think this is something that we can achieve at the COP, inshallah, because that would help developing countries to actually raise climate finance, or finance that they would use to reduce the emissions at the country level. But we all know the political economy of the monies that are involved in this climate change is that for the climate, the developed North was developed because of exploiting resources in the South, and have kept the South less developed to reduce the emissions. And so this is the shift of the economy from the North. Not very many people would want that to happen. And so that's why you are saying that commitments are more towards semblance of actions in terms of sustainable projects. But in reality, we are seeing the warming process or the emissions continuously increasing. So we need to take more active actions towards actually changing the production lines, and the legal practitioners need to help us in this, especially when they're reviewing country level policy and regional level policy. The other ones have been discussed. I don't want to go so much into them, but just to say that we have a separate market for the developed countries and a separate market for the developing countries. And that for me is a division of a market, because what's so unique about this carbon market that is not, because in a normal market, it is insensitive of geographical zones. A market is more about supply and demand of a product and the ability to deliver that product onto the market. But when you have these kind of divisions in the different markets, one for the developed and one for the undeveloped, it to me is part of the problem of this whole carbon trading mechanism. So I want to say, and as I come to an end, is that as lawyers, we need to understand the science associated with climate and climate change to be able to understand the implication of the targets and what needs to be done. And even to be able to craft legal provisions, policy provisions that can streamline some of the restrictions or challenges or complexities that are involved in this market. And also to help streamline the market for it to appear like a real market. But for now, it is more of a pseudo market. We need to recognize that the majority of these global frameworks are usually developed by the North, and for us, we come in to ratify without much contribution to the thought process around those international global policies. And so I encourage our lawyers and people who are interested in entering this business to be able to study the implications. It's not always about the money. It is also about the impact of that money on not only the society, but also on the environments in which we are operating in. It is good to make the money, but it's also good to make it in a legal manner. And also to help in making sure that we have a financial architecture that is streamlining carbon trading so that you do not have viabilities, disparities, differences that cannot be used to track down impact. And so for me, that's the message I would want to share to our colleagues. And I thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to us. Over to you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Of course, there is something that you mentioned, which is it's a bit of posing a good question as an developing country to have two kind of markets in terms of developing countries and developing countries. I'm starting to wonder, like, why do we have these two kind of markets? Because now, when we're talking about the the whole market in general, the purpose is only one, is to serve the environment, I mean, to protect the environment and the atmosphere in general. Now, why are we having this kind of two markets? And as African countries, specifically East African countries, you mentioned specifically on the how ready are we now to negotiate? Because clearly we are the one who the ball is on our hands. They are polluting more than us in terms of industrial revolution and all that. Now, are we able now to sit and negotiate in terms of better returns, better profit in terms of that market? In terms of, I mean, in this regard, why? I mean, I just wanted to clear and to point out those kind of questions. But the last one is in terms of skills on this sequestration and everything. Do we have enough skills to participate and prove clearly that the sequestration process have been done and the amount of credits have been receiving or generated true and all that? Are we there yet in terms of, I mean, East African general?
I think let me answer this in the following way, because it's a very interesting question that you're posing. One, do we have the capacities to actually engage? And my answer is yes. My answer is that we have the capacity to engage. The question that then we should ask ourselves is, are our stakeholders, both in the North and South, are they willing to allow us to engage and to engage in a meaningful manner? Engage from an equal partnership, engage from a point of respect, engage from a point of understanding that we also have something that we are bringing to the table, okay? And there my answer is no, because why I'm saying no, it goes back to the history of how we have been negotiating contracts, not only on carbon, but even in other mining sector, right? Take an example of mining and petroleum, right? We have little role in crafting those contracts that we sign with multinational corporations. Why? They have 400 years and more of experience in the sector. And so they have understood the intricacies, the nitty-gritties that they need to circumvent in the contract, and they bring them back to us as recipients of a already finished product. And that's where the problem is. We are waiting for others to give us something to respond to. We're waiting for others to define the narrative, our narrative, which I think is a problem. And I think we need to up our game and begin to define and dictate or determine what we would like to see. Because why should, like, going back to the question you asked me, why would you have two types of market in one market? Where else do you have a market which is a divided market? Where else do you have a market that is tailored to developed and tailored for undeveloped? Where do you find a market that is geographically restricted? Yeah, markets are open. Markets are true markets, and that's why for me I call it a pseudo market. It's not a real market. Yeah, somebody is defining what it actually looks like and using a terminology to just cover it up like a market. Yes, I mean people are making money out of it. I cannot dispute that. But the question is, does this market actually deliver the kind of output and products that we'd like to see? I mean, look at it this way. We talk about illicit financial flows coming out of Africa. There are illicit financial flows that actually go out of Africa. So I'm using two words, illicit and licit, the legal and illegal, all right? And so we cannot stop the legal transactions, notwithstanding the manipulations that are around them that result in capital flight out of the Africa. You can attempt to stop the illegal ones by putting all sorts of things, Africa free trade, continental, something you're talking about. But you can't, if you're not on the decision-making table, crafting table, deciding how these things are going to play out, we don't have that capacity. We don't have that opportunity to actually influence the carbon trading market. So we are followers. We end up becoming followers and not actually very effective followers. And probably that would explain why we have had so many COPs. Now 29, we're going for the 29th with a very little impact on the globe. And yet we continue to see deforestation. We continue to see high emissions every year as more people buy into old cars, especially in Africa. And you continue to see industry operating the way it has always operated. And for them covering up themselves with the thing that I have carbon credits, therefore I'm allowed to continue polluting. So I think as lawyers, it depends on what is your interest to go in. Are you going in for the money, or are you going in to actually deliver an impact to the environment? If you go in for the money, you are going to cover your face and not care about the impacts that come around as this, and basically you'll get the money because the money is out there waiting for whoever is interested to tap into it. But if you're interested to come in and improve for the purposes of safeguarding this environment for our future, then I've completed you said you to have proper engagement. Our negotiators many times are given only about 2.5 months to look through positions that have been crafted from our brothers whenever we're going to meet them at the COP. And they have discussed it to the point of determining where the semicolon and the commas are going to be, and you have no chance to change or add any opportunity or any new changes. Even our opinions that we come with to the table are subdivided because you find Africa coming on board alone, Caribbean coming on board alone, Pacific. So they have succeeded to break what we had created, the ACP, the Africa, Caribbean, Pacific bloc that was negotiating for these kind of things. And so this fragmentation of markets is more about somebody wanting to sustain a status quo where the financial architecture that is at play today continues to play out with the net movement of assets and capital to the developed world. So that's a geopolitical thing that we need to keep at the back of our minds as we continue to find opportunities into this so-called carbon trading market. Over to you. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Bazira. And there are a lot of questions to that regard, but I will encourage the members of the floor to write down their Q&A, and we'll have a session after all the speakers are presented for the question direct to the speakers. So without further ado, let me welcome another speaker. And we are having another speaker who is Professor Eliakim Zahabu. Professor Eliakim Zahabu is a profound leader in a forest and carbon trading studies, and the coordinator at the National Carbon Monitoring Center at Sokoine University of Agriculture. With his rich experience as an MRV expert under the UN RED program, Professor Zahabu will provide insight into Tanzania's legal frameworks for carbon trading, exploring both opportunities these markets offer and the risks they pose. Professor Zahabu, the floor is yours. You're welcome. Dr. Bazira, please, can you stop sharing your screen so that Professor Zahabu can share? Dr. Bazira? Yeah, can you stop sharing the screen so that Professor can share the screen? Thank you. Professor, you're welcome. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. And hi to all the participants. As I have been introduced, my name is Eliakim Zahab, and I work for the National Carbon Monitoring Center of Tanzania as the director. And let me just give you a little bit background that in Tanzania, we have this National Carbon Monitoring Center since 2016. And we started with the mandate of coordinating RED+ activities in the country. But our mandate expanded to host the national GHG inventory system. And now we have given another mandate of registering all carbon projects in the country. So I will just, different from the other presenters, that I will just share the experience we went through in the country up to when we have a regulation that regulates the carbon trading in the country. So just opening up the discussion that, as it has been pointed out by the other speakers, Carbon trading involves the sale of carbon credits. So you should have a project that generates the credits that you will make them available to the market and it trade them. And that is, it is already said again that we have two main types of carbon trading scheme that are operating the global. We have the voluntary carbon trading, but also we have the official carbon trading under the UNFCCC. So under the voluntary market is that individuals or companies or a government purchase carbon offsets to compensate for emission caused by their activities. So that one is done voluntarily, and it is done through what we call voluntary carbon standards. And we have a number of the standards that exist globally. I'm just giving you some examples there, but these standards operate aiming that the carbon standards, you provide assurance to buyers that the emissions reductions they buy actually happen and they are real. That is the objective of these kind of standards. So they operate globally, and as it has been said, this kind of trading started way back after just the Kyoto Protocol in 1990s. And since then, there has been a number of projects that have been initiated globally. Those ones that falls under the voluntary carbon markets, but again, those ones that fall under compliance carbon market. I'm just giving you an example in this slide here that way back in start of 2020s, we had already some projects that are happening in a country like ours under different carbon standards. Like this one is under a Vera standard. I am giving you these examples, but we have another standards like the CCB standard. We had also these projects that were happening in the country. So what I'm saying that we didn't have any national regulation that regulates these carbon projects in the country. So in 2022, the government initiated a process at which we developed what we call our carbon trading regulation. And these ones were made under our National Environmental Management Act, which allowed that. But also we will see how the powers have been delegated to the National Carbon Monitoring Center on how to regulate this business. So administratively, let me say that the Minister of Environment in Tanzania is the one that is mandated to oversee all climate change matters in the country. And you will see in the details of regulation that the minister is the one that issues the letter of endorsement for a project to start its activities here in Tanzania. But also the Ministry of Environment is also the national designated authority to oversee all climate change matters in the country. So at least those mandates are vested at the ministry, but also to the minister to oversee all carbon matters, climate change matters in the country. So as I said, we developed the national carbon trading regulations way back in 2022. And in that regulation, I'm sure that most of you at least went through these regulations and you have seen the various components of them. But I will touch some important issues that In the regulation, we define what is a project proponent. And this is the person, it might be a broker or someone with a knowledge on how to develop these projects, will come with the essential skills and expertise on carbon trading, but you also will come with some financial capabilities to invest in the carbon trading, but also they should observe all the legal requirements in operating a carbon project in the country. So these ones, the project proponents, works with what we call a managing authority. Managing authority is defined in the regulation as the one that owns the resource. If it is a forest, then the owner of the forest is what we call a managing authority. Let me put it very clear that in Tanzania, the regulation we have, it doesn't allow someone to come and buy land in order to start a carbon project. You have to enter into partnership with the managing authority for you to be able to start a carbon project here in Tanzania. So project requirements are listed there. If you can get time, we can pass through. But again, if you get hold of the regulations and the guidelines, you might be able to see most of these stuffs. So I have them there in that slide, but I also have another slide which is the same project requirements that you have to fulfill in order for you to start a carbon project here in Tanzania. And in these other slides, I just outlined the steps that are needed for someone to register a carbon project in Tanzania. You have first to submit your project idea in terms of you fill up the form, and this can happen anytime. And you will be given feedback and told to proceed with another step of preparation of a project concept note. And after the concept note is accepted, you get what we call a letter of no objection. But again, from the letter of no objection, you will be told to proceed with the preparation of the project document. And this project document ends up for somebody to be issued a letter of endorsement. And as I said, this one is given by the minister. And after this stage, you have to enter into a contractual agreement between the parties that are participating in the project before you commence the implementation. So that is what is happening in terms of steps to follow, and the duration for each is indicated there. So in the contractual agreement, you have to include some clauses, but not limited to these ones that are given here in this slide you are seeing. So at least for any contract, you have to make sure that you go through this list, exhaust it, and in addition, you can add some more clauses that they are seeing to be relevant. So that is all about what the regulation is saying, but also the regulations gives guides on how the costs and the benefits can be distributed or shared among the stakeholders. It is very clear on what the proponent is expected to get, the managing authority, who is the owner of the resource, is expected to get, and the other stakeholders, as you see in that list. And as I said in the beginning, the proponents were just doing whatever they do, they see fit, and without the guidance of the government. But now with these regulations, at least all the proponents know that when they start a project here, they are not alone to get the lion's share on themselves. They have to consider these other stakeholders and even pay the government fees and charges that are also specified in the regulation. So at least we have this in place. And let me just tell you that now we have an experience of more than 1 year of just instituting these regulations. And at the beginning, we had a lot of resistance, and especially from project proponents, because it is an obvious thing that in the past they didn't be regulated. So now they see that they are regulated and they need to pay the fees and divide the CAC with the other stakeholders. So the resistance was there with these new regulations. But when it came to the party of the buyers were very happy about these regulations because they are now confident that everything they do has got blessings from the government, and the government is actually monitoring what is done. So to them, it is a blessing to have these kind of regulation and having the government interference in the whole business. So they are now very happy, the investors and the buyers. So I just give you an experience again that when the regulations became in power, then the office of the ministry that was responsible for overseeing climate change matters delegated the powers to the National Carbon Monitoring Center to start up a registry. And we have also a national carbon project assessment technical committee. So the center is there to also facilitate the functions of this committee, to scrutinize the projects and to recommend them to be issued, to proceed from one step to another. So at least we have this committee that works under the center. So since January 2023 up to 30th March 2024, we have received 42 carbon project applications, including those ones that were still running. And we issued the letter of no objection to 10 projects and the letter of endorsement to 3 projects to allow them implement the activities. And the landscape down there showed that we have projects in the agriculture sector, which we have one project that is a biochar project, which you apply biochar to improve the soil fertility, and you get multiple products to increase the productivity, but also you increase the soil carbon contents. So you sequester carbon in the soils. But also we have agroforestry projects, and these ones, they involve distribution of tree seedlings and the other agroforestry components, plant components, to improve the agroforestry systems and generate carbon credits. But also we have 2 projects that involve the management of grazing lands, rangelands. And we have this project happening, improving the rangelands grazing patterns and improve also the soil fertility and get carbon sequestered in the soil. But we have forestry projects, and these ones involve planting trees where the place was not a forest before, that is afforestation. But we have reforestation projects that involve restoring degraded forest land. But we have RED Plus projects, 15 of them, working in different localities in the country to conserve the available natural forest that we already have. So this covers the forest landscape kind of a project we have. In the energy sector, we have a diversity of them, ranging from the use of alternative energy sources, and this one here, the case here is the LPG, but also we have improved the cook stove projects. We have 6 of these projects at different scales. We have mini hydro projects, but also we have solar, the use of solar in different applications. But also we have projects on electric vehicle. We have one project. And there's in the mining sector, they improve the mining activities and whatever. So we have another project on that sector. But also we have safe drinking water projects that are happening here in Tanzania. And we have also 2 waste management projects that are also happening in Tanzania. So we have a total of 42 different projects. And let me just say that we still have a number of applications that we process. But our mission is to cover a large part of the country with the carbon projects. And we do have all the support that are needed, like a political will, and everyone is looking forward to see that they participate in this benefit, in this trading, and people, especially the villagers, get to benefit out of the business. So let me conclude so that I spare a place for Q&A. I know that there are a lot of them which will come from participants. So let me give them an ample time. But in conclusion, I can just say that there's a vast opportunity for carbon trading in Tanzania and East Africa is large. What we need is to share experiences among ourselves on how this business can be done and regulated. And we also need to harmonize our legal frameworks. I have seen a draft regulation from Kenya, but I have not seen any from Uganda and Ethiopia and also DRC. So I think other countries in East Africa, they can learn from what we did here in Tanzania and also what is there in Kenya, so that at least we have harmonized the kind of frameworks. But also, as I said, genuine proponents are happy to be regulated. So if we develop these regulations, they will attract them to come and invest in our East African countries. So I thank you very much, all of you. And I now give the floor to Edie. Edie, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor. Your last statement is very, very crucial. You said genuine proponent are very happy when they are regulated. Of course, that's very true, Professor. I remember last year we had 2 or 3 clients who wanted to penetrate the market, and the regulation were quite new, like they wanted an opinion and everything. So we had to dig and have several discussions with the VPO's office environment and see some of the things which are unclear. And I'm glad that there are still, there are some amendment to the regulation. Of course, it's still evolving and still new and all that. But the amendment that came this year last year, actually, on October,
Yes.
Amendment to the regulation were quite clear to clarify some of the things. So yeah, that's very right. And we still need we still need more time to rephrase or to make more of these laws more of welcoming to the investors. So thank you so much, Professor. I think I will give room to the Q&A later. At this moment, I would like to welcome another and our final speaker, Miss Esther Mlingwa. Madam Esther Mlingwa, who is an assistant lecturer at the University of Dar es Salaam and an advocate of the High Court of Tanzania. Her research interests span in human rights, environment, and international law, crucial for understanding the multifaceted challenges of new carbon markets. Madam Esther will highlight these challenges and discuss strategic ways to navigate and leverage emerging market opportunities effective. Madam Esther, you are welcome and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Edie. I would tell everyone that I'm not going to share my screen because I'm in a shared office space. I don't want you seeing people moving around. Yes. So thank you so much for the honors, Edie. I am humbled to join a panel of esteemed and expert presenters before me. I thank Dr. Mutua for setting the stage, Dr. Basira for leaving us with a question: who are the winners, who are the losers in this carbon trading business? And again, I also thank Professor Eliakim for a wonderful presentation on the Tanzanian framework and the call for harmonization in the East African region. Now, my particular topic isn't one that is very interesting in cycles of lawyers, but is a predominant discussion among academics, especially when it comes to engagement of communities in development activities and the concept of sustainable development in general. Now, I'll focus on carbon trading in East Africa and just provide some perspectives on community rights and participation in this trade or market. When you talk about community rights, the word community itself is a very broad concept because it involves a large number of groupings within the community, including minorities, rural communities, and every other kind of grouping you can find within a community. So essentially, I do not focus on defining this term, but rather just want to leave you with the understanding that community rights include a full range of rights. All the human rights that we know of are rights that communities should enjoy when in a setting of a group. Now, when it comes to carbon trading markets, one of the challenges that specifically communities are facing is the equitable sharing of distribution of benefits from carbon trading businesses. And here we look at to the extent where how far are communities empowered or involved to take a lead in this carbon trading business. And again, are communities realizing the economic value coming out of carbon trading? So these are one of the challenges that have been identified in a lot of literature and reports on the carbon trade, especially in East Africa. Now, just for us lawyers, one of the things that we should be aware about is that we need to know what legal protection mechanisms are available within our own jurisdictions to safeguard community rights within the carbon markets, and also how far do these align, for example, with international human rights standards. Now, fortunately, most of the legal protections that are available to safeguard community rights are actually the normal mechanisms that we have in our own jurisdictions: constitutional protection, statutory protection, and the like. And so here I identify some of these, including you can have a constitutional provision that guarantees, for example, protection of the right to property or access to obtain information. And you can use this constitutional guarantee for this particular right to also advocate for more involvement or meaningful participation of local communities. Again, we also have to look at large tenure systems, and understand in East Africa, we have different tenure systems, but how far do these systems protect, for example, communal rights to ownership of land, customary land rights, and maybe involvement of local communities in land use and planning processes, because these are one of the ways that we can safeguard the rights of communities. So as lawyers, we need to think how far this our tenure systems do in fact accommodate local communities, especially in the context of carbon trading. Another mechanism is the free, prior, and informed consent that is essential, especially when these carbon projects can affect, and sometimes adversely, the rights of communities to enjoy certain benefits from the environment. So it is important that communities are involved and they get free, prior and informed consent to participate in these projects, or part of their land being used to participate. We also have environmental and social impact assessments. And for most East African countries, these are legal requirements. In Tanzania, we have this requirement under our Environment Management Act. But it serves as one of the mechanisms where you can ensure that at least there is a written document that has outlined the environmental and social impacts of carbon trading projects and how far communities will be affected, and mitigation measures that the proponents are bringing up in this particular project. Another important aspect that countries must have also benefit sharing mechanisms. In this part, I commend Tanzania for at least with these new regulations and guidelines, we now have a very clear sharing mechanism for carbon trading projects, including those that are land-based, non-land-based, and Professor Eliakim has done a very good job in outlining this in the diagram in his presentations. Another important aspect is access to justice, and here we talk about avenues for accessing justice, our normal court systems and etc. But also public interest litigation, where local communities can move as a group demanding for protection of their rights. And lastly, we have international agreements and standards. I know East African countries are key players in the international stage. We have these international agreements that we have signed under the UN framework and our own African regional framework, but also in the EAC framework. So these international instruments carry a lot of provisions that essentially also target to protect communities, and we should see to it that we implement them within our own domestic legal frameworks. Again, here I leave you, the audience, with this line that it is important to understand that the effectiveness of these legal mechanisms actually also depend largely on implementation, enforcement, and the capacities of the institutions to uphold them. And here again, one could also talk about so many things, but it's also important to also have or give local communities agency by respecting their traditional knowledge systems and also their own governance framework within the community, which are also crucial when it comes to carbon trading. So I wanted also to focus on the issue of inclusivity and participation. And here I will look into some of the best practices and lessons that have been identified in literature on mechanisms for protecting local communities in carbon trading. And one of the ways or the best practices that I have identified, or you can identify in reported works and literature, is that you need to have a lot of stakeholder engagement. And as previously mentioned by other speakers, we have a lot of players in this market. And so it is important to have their engagement and especially their understanding and or for them to explain how far they incorporate community interests, but also taking the community itself as an important stakeholder within the discussion in the carbon trading negotiations and etc. Capacity building is also another aspect that is particularly important in this topic. And here it's not only capacity of, for example, governance institutions in the formal government system, but also capacities of traditional governance structures within the communities themselves. And these are usually forgotten because a lot of capacity building usually focuses on government entities and leaving behind these resourceful governance structures already existing within the community. Again, here we have free, prior, and informed consent, which is also very essential, especially so that communities can support these projects, but also reap the benefits of these projects. We also have benefit sharing schemes as one of the mechanisms for inclusion And here the scheme should be structured that the local communities get a high percentage of the benefit, because in most instances, they are either the managing authority or they're the ones who are adversely affected by this project, and not companies maybe in the Western world or industrial countries. Again, transparent governance structures are needed, and especially this comes from a lot of literature against carbon trading and whether it is a very good practice. And here I quote my good brother, Dr. Bazira, who asked us the question that who are the winners and who are the losers of this? So it's essentially also important to have transparent governance structures so that a lot of this information, including the flow of money, whether these projects are viable and etc., are known to the public and etc. Monitoring and evaluation is also important, where you have periodic monitoring of these projects to know their viability and whether do they deliver what they had promised initially, and this is very important. I commend the Tanzanian government for also having this requirement in the new regulations, so the future seems bright, but we shall have to see also, because these regulations are still also in their infancy. Now, transparency and social impact assessment are very crucial for these particular projects, because they also give them trust and credibility, especially when it comes to local communities. They will support more of these projects where things are clear, they are known to them, they take part in decision making and etc. So they have an incentive to participate. But also market efficiency, because carbon trading is also coming back to carbon markets. And so where there's transparency, markets will also be efficient, because we will see whether this actually works and etc. But also for the sake of social and environmental accountability, especially on the part of those that are buying these carbon offsets and etc. Equitable sharing of distribution of benefits, this is also particularly important, and especially for local communities who until now, in a lot of literature, it is presented as if they have not yet enjoyed or reaped the benefit of taking part in these projects. Again, it's essential to focus on transparency because of the policy and regulatory requirements. I understand a lot of countries, they are still developing their legislations, or they don't have legislations. So at least for those that have, and they have these requirements of transparency, for those investors looking to invest or penetrate this market, they need to ensure this, because it is part of policy and regulatory compliances. Again, it is essential that we prioritize compliancy and conducting comprehensive assessments on social impacts and carbon markets, so that carbon markets can achieve their goals of reducing emissions, promoting sustainable development, but also mitigating climate change, while also protecting human rights. And here I have a few case studies just mapping out where there's a lack of community participation, what would be the end result, and where there was involvement of community. So I picked this particular REDD+ projects for no particular reason, but just to I sampled them out because of their unique differences. In the first project in Kilwa, the project was structured such that villagers took a lead and full ownership of management of the responsible area. While in the Kondoa project, it was different because a lot of the villages did not accept this project and rejected it with genuine concerns such as land grabbing and also exclusion from forest access. So you see, these comparables between the two is that when local communities take a lead, there is more acceptance and they reap more benefits from carbon trading projects, where conversely, if you don't have the same, for example, if there's no fair consent or information or transparency, there could be an atmosphere of suspicion over, for example, issues such as land grabbing and exclusion. And so communities may reject carbon trading projects because of these genuine fears. Yeah, so these are important lessons that we should take into hand. And when we're advising clients, these are also the key hotspots that we should be trying to negotiate in favor of our own communities, where all these projects are taking into consideration the rights, and particularly those of communities in these projects. That is all. Being the last speaker, I knew that time will not be on my side, so I try to be as scant as possible to leave time for questions from the audience. Thank you so much. Back to you, Edie. Edie?
Oh, thank you so much, Madam Esther. Your presentation actually today reminds me when I was in the University of Dar es Salaam and you taught me environmental law. So thank you. It's just an awesome presentation.
Thank you so much, Edie. It's been an honor to have you. Yeah.
So to give room for Q&A, maybe we have one for Dr. Bazira. The question from Adrian, I think, said carbon trading or engaging in production, carbon trading or engaging in production of carbon due to the Hello? Yeah, I look a minute. Let me. Yes.
Hello, could you
let me
repeat the question?
Yeah, Dr. Bazira, are you there?
Yes, could you repeat the question?
Oh, yeah, okay. The question starts from an explanation, says carbon trading or engaging in production of carbon credits for purchase by polluters to offset their pollution, meaning the polluters continue to pollute. Developing nations, being those that emit less CO2 or GHG, due to the developing nature. The environment is global. Pollutants continue means the environment of the developing nation continue to decline, which means we'll be unable to produce the same volume of carbon credits eventually, unless pollution overall reduces. Without a reduction in the real production of pollutants, engaging in providing carbon credits is similar to permitting pollution. Now, does carbon market actually cause pollution or GHG or CO2 to be reduced or provide permission to continue to emit?
All right, I think I have got the gist of the question, and
yeah.
I can give you very good answers on this. My answer is straight. That's why I used in my presentation. I used the word penitence. Yeah, I'm not a Catholic, but I know that Catholics go to the Catholic Church for penitence for the sins that they have committed. I look at carbon trading as one mechanism of penitence. Somebody is going for penitence, in other words, to say, I'm sorry for the sins I'm committing, but I continue to commit the sins. Right? That is, for me, my simple description of the carbon trading mechanism. So does it reduce carbon emissions? It actually has the potential to reduce carbon emissions. The question is, how are we applying it? All these projects my brothers and sisters have talked about in Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, those are excellent projects. But the question is that we need to be doing is, of those investments that we have had, can we measure the amount of carbon that has been sequestered as a result of those investments? If you have invested $1 million in a project of tree planting and the trees have grown to full canopy, can we now calculate the amount of carbon dioxide that canopy is going to absorb during the night and cause a reduction in the global carbon? Because like he said, we're in a global village. If you look at ourselves being in a bottle, the globe being a bottle, we're in the same bottle, right? So what we put in that bottle is going to affect everybody. It does not matter where it is coming from, whether it's coming from the global north or the global south. That emission is an emission that is going to affect everyone on the globe. So for me to continue to pollute and pretend and say you know what, you guys in the south are polluting less. I'm going to pay you for the less pollution that you're doing in sustainable projects that you're going to have, projects that are going to help you move away from using charcoal, firewood, and using electricity. And therefore, I'm going to invest in your CDM projects like hydropower projects and, you know, forestation, agroforestry, you know, sinking carbon in the ground, so that you continue to remove the carbon that the guys in the north are emitting. That for me is unfair, because it makes Africa or the developing world remain undeveloped, because you are telling me, allow me to develop and for you remain undeveloped, but we shall give you the products once we have produced them. For me, that concept is wrong. Allow me to be, I also want to live the life the Americans live. I also want to live the life the Europeans live. I also want to drive on paved roads that are not full of potholes, right? I also want to use gas in my home. I want to use electricity that is affordable, right? So these are the questions that we need to be interrogating, not just because somebody is, you know, dangling money at us, that this money is carbon trading. Let's look at it in terms of what is the impact of this money in respect to our lives, in respect to our environment. So does carbon trading cause pollution? My answer is yes. It causes net pollution. So for me, I want to know that whatever we are paying for the carbon trading that we are trading, that it is going to result in a net reduction of carbon. Can we make those calculations based on the investments that are going around the globe? Can we sit down and say, for all the carbon that is coming from the US, to China, and the rest, we have invested this amount of money in the South to make sure that this, what on a daily basis, the amount of carbon that is being produced on a daily basis has been reduced by 50% by the investments that are in other countries under the Clean Development Mechanism countries. So the conversation, that's why I say that if you are interested in money, you will follow the money. And so it depends on what you're interested in. As a lawyer helping the legal processes and the carbon trading, you are going to make the money, and the money is there waiting for you. But in terms of the impacts of the actions that are being taken, just know that there is little or no contribution to reduction of the CO2. We are in the same bottle. It is going to boil, and we are going to boil with each other. Over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Bazira. I'm encouraging more questions in the chat or the Q&A. But to add on that, Dr. Bazira, maybe also Professor, you can add something. It touches different angles in that regard, because now we're talking about the economy, the economy of a particular country in terms of industrial and all that. Now, what if we both reach that level of being industrialized? Like, okay, what if there is no longer developing countries? What will be the status, and what will be status in that regard?
Yes, maybe let me just pop in by saying that it depends on how we set up the issues and the systems. Like I remember in the last 5 years, we had a slogan of going to be industrialized in Tanzania. But we didn't put any condition for those industries that were developed to abide to reduction of emissions and something like that. So we didn't have any conscious mechanism to task those investors on how they deal with their emission levels. So it is something which need to be built not only to individuals, but also to our governments, to become aware of all these processes. And when you go to a certain development pathway, then you have to be sensitive that you have to also respect the environment. So in a nutshell, I can just say it like that.
Thank you so much, Professor. I wanted to add something. Maybe Dr. Bazira can correct me. I think there is a way also for us as East African countries, and the market is still evolving, to reach at the stage where we are both project proponent and managing authorities in terms of employing more people or investing in more people to learn the market, to know how to transform into credits and all that, so that at the end of the day, we benefit both, being the project proponent and being the managing authority. Then we sell those to outsiders, so we'll be the main players to the market. Do you think that's possible? Dr. Bazira?
Yes, I'm around. And my answer is yes, it is possible that we can actually change the dynamic where we are negotiating with our terms on the table. Because many times, in all the projects that I've seen, we don't negotiate from our based on our terms. We are on a recipient end. We're on the receiving end of projects, ideas that come to us with the intention of contributing to the carbon reduction processes, and people getting credits and feeling good that yes, this time around I've contributed $1 million to forest tree planting and that kind of stuff in the developing countries, right? That is good. But we have not been part of the designing of the narrative for carbon trading. So it has been out there, it has been operating. The question is, do we really understand what it actually is? Do we understand the motive behind the whole carbon trading? Do we understand the winners of this whole process? Do we understand how the money is moving and for what purpose? What's the proportion of the money that is coming into this carbon process vis-a-vis the money that is out there in the economy? And are we in a position to determine our price, the price of our carbon, based on the trees that we've set out? I mean, take an example of, I was discussing with some of my staff who are with me here, and I was telling them, look, a long time ago, the forests that we have in Uganda were connected to the forests in the DRC. And so if we are to benefit, we need to try to find a way if we can recover the forests as they were in the 1940s, right? Is that possible? I think it is possible. If we put in a policy that says, let everybody, if you were to plant a tree on your birthday, imagine how many trees would have planted by now. Just that, as a running policy. If you plant it on every birthday, how many trees will be growing today? Right?
Many.
So those are some of the policies and actions that we need to see. Once you have put in place a mechanism that has now put in place an infrastructure, a resource, a natural resource that is helping us reduce the carbon, we should be able to determine the price. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I seem to be speaking to myself.
No, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So now I want us to be interested in something else that is coming up in the current carbon trading. There's what is called carbon border adjustment. We did not discuss it on this platform. The carbon border adjustment is going to adjust the amount of money that can come to Kenya, Tanzania, based on the boundaries, based on how much forest cover you have, how much carbon sequestration you can actually do as a country based on the colonial boundaries, right? So DRC, by default, would be receiving better payments and better price for its carbon because it has a larger surface area of carbon, of forest cover. And therefore, it's sequestering more, and therefore, it would have a higher price based on the market. And probably those are the ones who would be receiving the $80 per ton. And then my brothers in Kenya who don't have very much forest will probably be receiving $10 per ton, right? And the Tanzanians receiving maybe $30 per ton because of the surface area that we have based on that framework. So are we in position to negotiate the price in that respect? My answer is yes. And that takes the courage and commitment. I don't know how to say it, but I think it is important that for our technical officers in our government places, in academic area, actually begin to demand, because we are the ones who are sucking in all the CO2. We are the ones who are supposed to be setting the price, not the person who has actually emitted it. So you cannot be an arbiter in your own case. Yeah, this is for me, that's what it appears like. You are the producer, you're not producing the carbon, more carbon. You are the one determining the price on the market. Honestly, that has to change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bazira. I think we are out of time, and Professor, I think you answered this question on the comment, so I'm not sure if there is a need to answer it live. In terms, the question on the do pines and Eloctopus qualify for carbon credits? I think you answered it already.
Here's a follow-up question. Can you just write me a message?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So before I hand over to Gabriel, I think I would like to have only one statement from each Professor and Dr. Bazira and Madam Esther, just a takeaway statements that we can go with. Just only one statement. Only one. You're welcome. Just short and clear.
Can I go?
Yes, Dr. Bazira, please.
So my message is let's up our game in this whole conversation of carbon trading, and lawyers, please come on board, because there are legal issues we need to sort out. We also need to sort out the policy issues at country level. So without you guys, without all of us, we shall continue to be exploited. Thanks.
Thank you. Professor?
Hello, what I can say that let us not shy away from this business. We have to find some solutions on how to address the challenges we face and move forward without losing this opportunity. That is what I encourage people to take home.
Thank you so much, Professor. Madam Esther, finalize.
Mine is on communities, and I think as lawyers, we should advocate for local communities to reap also the benefits of these projects. So as we negotiate these contracts and etc., we should also look into the role of communities. And yeah, that is all.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor, Dr. Bazira, and Madam Esther, Professor Eliakim. Thank you so much for your contribution. And of course, it is indeed an enlightenment, and we'll learn a lot from this discussion. Now we're out of time for 2 minutes. Let me hand over to Gabriel, who will proceed. Thank you so much again, and I think I'll meet you again in the next webinar. Thank you so much.
And thank
too.
you, Mr. Idi Kasi. Thank you so much, our esteemed panelists, Dr. Mbazira, Ms. Mlingwa, Professor Liakamo, Dr. Muti. Thank you. That was quite a very lovely session. Thank you for keeping it short, sweet, and precise. And like it has been said now, I think there is a general consensus that lawyers have to come on board and join this debate on carbon markets and carbon trade, because there's quite a lot of opportunity that there is for lawyers there. So as East Africa Law Society, will continue engaging virtually, and hopefully we'll engage physically to discuss some of these very important issues regarding carbon markets within the region. So on behalf of the Secretariat and management, we are extremely grateful that we've had this very impactful session. I have been impacted positively, and I'm sure you too have been impacted positively. We'll be issuing out certificates of attendance to all members that have been part of this, but also certificates of appreciation for you, our esteemed panelists and moderator, respectively. On Thursday 18th, we'll be having a very interesting discussion on sports dispute resolution. So are you a sports practitioner out there and you'd like to know how to resolve disputes in sports law? Thursday is your day. We'll have esteemed panelists right from the Southern Horn of Africa to the Northern Horn of Africa. It's going to be quite an amazing session. So please feel free to join us and log on. If you are out there and you're wondering how you would like to follow our programs, please follow us on Facebook at East Africa Law Society, follow us on Twitter at EL Law Society, and check out our website as East Africa Law Society. Register to become a member today, register to be part of this amazing engagement that we are having. And from us at the Secretariat, have a wonderful evening, and we look forward to hosting you again on Thursday. Cheers.
Yes. Thank you so much, Gabriel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay.